Hi, this is Dr. Stephen with Outclick Magazine. Today we have a very special program. We welcome Craig Smith, who is the president of Source Events. We also welcome Timothy J. Smith, an award-winning American screenwriting and novelist. He is the author of Fire on the Island, which won the gold medal in 2017 at the Faulkner Wisdom Competition. He's the author of other works, which includes A Vision of Angels, Cooper's Promise, and The Fourth Courier. He currently lives in France. Craig is in Miami, and I am here in Fort Lauderdale. We are excited to talk today about his book, Fire on the Island. It is an amazing novel set in Greece. Timothy, welcome. We are excited to talk to you today. Craig, I will tell, Craig took me on my first international journey. We went to the Greek Isles last year. I was not prepared for what a fantastic trip it was going to be and how awe-inspiring Greece was. So I want to start out and ask you, tell us about the town where it's set and just the setting of the book.
Well, it's actually set on the Greek island of Lesbos. I intentionally didn't mention the name of the island in the book because I wanted to keep it a little bit anonymous in a way.
Okay.
Because if you know it's set in a certain place, and you're really obligated to be a lot truer to the place. But it's set on the island of Lesbos. It's set in a village called Molivos, although in my book I call it Vervulos because back in 1972 to 1974 I lived in a small village on the island of Santorini called Vervulos, and this is my homage to Greece. And so I wanted to, out of love for my original village, I wanted to call the village Vervulos. Molivos is the real name. It's on the northern coast of Lesbos. It's a really traditional village. There's not much tourism there. There are no cruise ships. It's just a beautiful, stunning place to be, and the people are really wonderful. And I've been going there for 15 years.
And you lived in Greece. Tell us about your experience there a little bit. We were chatting about that earlier.
I've been going to Greece since 1972. It was my first job after college, after I got my BA. By chance, arranged to do some work for a National Sociological Institute in Greece on rural-urban migration. The Aegean Islands and the Northern Mountains have lost about 50% of their population in the last 20 years. So we're looking at ways to keep people basically on the islands or in the mountains. I was stationed on Santorini for 2 years at that time, or I shouldn't say stationed, posted there. I lived there and worked on various strategies to try to create jobs and that sort of stuff. But it was kind of exciting. Anybody who's listening to this who knows Santorini today will probably find it unbelievable that in each of the 2 winters that I lived there, I was the only foreigner on the island for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. There were no fast boats. There was no airport. Big winds would come up and would shut down all shipping for a couple of weeks, and that's where I lived. I have now spent about a total of 7 years of my life in Greece.
Right. Got it. So Timothy, it seems to me like the book is a love letter to Greece and the Greek people and the beautiful settings of Greece. Was it actual experiences that you had in Greece that inspired the stories that you told in this book?
Absolutely. There's some things that are fictional, of course, but the main characters are all really people I know very well. And as they've read the book, of course, they recognize themselves. They're happy about it. I always told them that the dog Dingo, which exists, would actually open and close the book, because whenever I start a piece of writing, I always have in my mind the opening scene and the closing scene, and that's exactly how it happened. All the stuff about the restaurants and the refugees and all that stuff is all really very real stuff. The story of the arsonist, which is central to the story. In fact, there was an arsonist on the island that set a series of fires that were pretty harmless. They were kind of up a valley, and that's what happens in my book. But in my book, they get closer and closer to this one village and become ominous. Like somebody's telling them, "I'm going to burn down the village." And that is not true. That's where I take truth and I turn it into fiction to create a plot that's kind of suspenseful and fun for people to read.
Right. I'm curious, since your initial years, you said you were living in Santorini for 2 years, and you mentioned Vervulos Beach, which is Santorini. So why did you choose Lesbos as the setting for this novel then?
I know it better now. I mean, my experience in Santorini, of course, goes back to the early 1970s, and I've been going to, my partner and I have been going to Vervulos. I'm sorry, I've been going to Lesbos for the last 15 years for at least once a year, often 2 or 3 times. It just depends what's going on in the village we go to. If there's a significant birthday or a death or a wedding, then we go back. But, you know, we usually spend about 4, 5, 6 weeks there every year and got to know people really well. We were very much involved with the refugee situation 2015 and 2017 when that was a huge crisis, and in approximately 12 months 500,000 refugees showed up on the beach next to our village over the course of 12 months. So it's all that's very true, but that's why, just to basically set the story there.
Got it. I mean, as you know, it's like the news about the refugee crisis in Lesbos doesn't get a lot of airtime in the U.S. What is it that you would like, you know, people here in the U.S. to know about that crisis that we're not hearing?
Well, I think a lot of people have heard this week that the main camp on the island,
right,
called Moria, M-O-R-I-A, was burned down this week. And it's unclear who really burned it down, but the fact is that it was burned down. It was rather predictable that this was going to happen because there's just been a lot of tension recently. The government was trying to build kind of a permanent refugee camp, or whatever you want to call it, on the island, and the islanders have always sort of opposed this. There was, when the refugee crisis really developed into a huge thing, like around 2015, 16, there was a lot of help for the refugees, but it's been very difficult for the islanders in terms of their own economy, in terms of their own livelihoods. And so the fact that these 13,000 people were living in enormously squalid conditions, and you know, tourists were afraid to come to the island and stuff. You know, they never should have been afraid because it all was kind of removed from where the tourists are. But it was, you know, it wasn't really a crisis until this actually happened. In a sense, it was a humanitarian crisis because the living conditions were terrible. But now there's no place for them to be. But I guess I want people to know that, you know, refugees are just people who have fled a war that the West has started, and you know, we're kind of responsible for it.
Right. Are there any particular organizations that, like, you know, you support or that we can know about to make a difference to help these refugees?
I don't know who's really doing it right now. There were, and I was actively involved in actually helping set up a local NGO, one of the first on the island, called the Starfish Foundation, and that's, you can find that on the web, and they have continued to be actively involved in helping the refugees. But in terms of international organizations, it took them a long time to get there. We volunteers early on did everything, portable toilets, but we weren't allowed to provide portable toilets. And then finally, in early 2017, IRC, International Refugee, I forget what it's really called. It's a major organization, finally set up a tent, but just at that point in time, Europe and Turkey came to an agreement that Turkey was not going to let these refugees cross in the volume that they were crossing. And so that camp eventually was just closed down. So who officially is really working at an international level there, I'm unsure at this point. But Starfish Foundation would be a place to start and ask how to help. That would be the best way to go.
Great.
And tell us, go ahead, Craig. Did you have another question?
No, go ahead.
And the book is a balance of romance and some comedy. If you want to tell us what you can about the story, but obviously not revealing the whole plot, but and the LGBT things that you've got going on, but a mix of both.
Well, the comedy or the humor is just really comes from Greece itself, because it's a fairly lighthearted place in a lot of ways. And my other books have been a little bit darker. The book that was published last year, you mentioned the Fourth Courier, set in Poland, is a much darker book in a sense. But I wanted the humor because Greece is a place where people enjoy themselves. And I think by coincidence that with this COVID and the lockdowns and everything, that people actually need a little bit of humor. And so I think this book will really appeal to them. All of my books have gay protagonists. I'm gay myself. And when I looked at telling what stories I was going to tell, and I looked at the world, I was originally told when I started writing, don't pick me as a gay writer, but it was that gay writing at the time was largely considered by the general public as basically erotica, and it wasn't real stories about real people. And I just felt that I wanted to tell stories with a gay sensitivity, and so my gay characters are FBI agents or CIA agents or journalists, people who are like everybody else, and have real lives, and they're not just all thinking about sex all the time, thinking about other things. And so, and I also, I've been going to Greece for so many years that I've experienced the gay situation there. I understand how shameful it is for gay men here today. It's a very tough thing for Greek men to be open. There's more than there used to be, but it's still a very, very tough thing. And I felt I wanted to build that into the book, and a lot of the scenes that are in the book are things that I've witnessed. I've seen things happen, and I know how shameful and where they go and all this sort of stuff. It's like you just can't be openly gay in a Greek village. Not as a Greek, you might be able to be as a foreigner, but it's very hard as a Greek to do that.
Do you feel, Timothy, that's changed over the years? That it's easier for Greek men or women to come out to their families?
I imagine it's easier, but I also think it's very difficult still.
Right.
It's just not. It's not a good situation for them. So if they can leave, they leave. The nice thing about Lesbos and the village Molyvos is that it has had for many years an interesting international set of people living there as well that are much more open to gay experience or gay people or the world experiences as we know them. And there's a bar in the village that is run by a couple of gay guys, and they're very open about that. But initially, they had to be pretty discreet about even who they were and what kind of bar it was. But that's changed a little bit, Molyvos is an unusual village in that sense because it does have this sort of international history. Leonard Cohen used to go there, and people like that. Who are well known in the international world. So they brought some outside ideas and attitudes that have changed the village a little bit, but not entirely. I mean, it's still a Greek village, and it still has its hang-ups about homosexuality. That's for sure.
I definitely enjoyed getting to feel like I was sitting there at the restaurant tables and getting to know the characters, and having gone and seen the white and blue buildings everywhere. It took me back to the memories of going to Greece and seeing the islands. I felt like I was sitting there with the characters and hearing the fires in the background.
Yes, although on this particular island, because it's so close to Turkey, it doesn't have the white buildings. That's the southern part.
Oh, really?
Of Greece.
Okay.
These are all kind of stone buildings, and
with
red tiled roofs, and so they're not like the villages in Santorini. They're really different. But yes, I do capture, I think, the sense of the restaurants and they're in the harbor. This little village has a harbor, and it's the restaurants that are there. The only thing I added to the description of the village was with the fuel tank, the Coast Guard fuel tank. There is a Coast Guard station. The fuel tank is not looming up behind it, So, but it is in my novel because that becomes.
Is there a real church bell tower that's going to fall? Is that?
There's a church bell tower that could fall.
Okay. We don't want to give too much of the story away. Craig, what's your favorite part of Greece of going? How many times have you been?
I've been to Greece now, I believe, like 8 times.
Okay.
I think my favorite part of it is that, well, a couple things. One is that every time I go, I discover something new about Greece, because every time I go, I usually include a couple of new islands that we haven't been to. So one thing is like experiencing it vicariously through our guests, because for many of our guests, it's their first time to Greece. And as I think you know, Stephen, and you know, Timothy, there's something extremely magical about your first time to Greece. One thing that I often get from our guests is that, you know, they go really excited about Mykonos and Santorini. Mykonos because it's the gay Mecca, and they've heard about that their whole lives.
Right.
You know, in Santorini because of the beauty of it. But oftentimes at the end of the trip, when I ask people what their favorite island was, they say, well, I loved Mykonos. It was what I expected, but it was, you know, crowded, and it was very, you know, it had the gay nightlife, but big cruise ships. I love Santorini, but it was very crowded. But my favorite experience was something unexpected. So then they'll tell me about Sifnos or Milos or, you know, one of the other islands, or Patmos. And when I ask them about that, and I think it's reflected in your book, oftentimes what they talk about is like, everybody has an image or a dream of Greece, and it's when they go to these smaller, unexpected islands that they discover it. The small village, the kids playing on the sand, the authentic food, the warm, you know, the warm greeting of the people there, and it's that they fall in love with. They just walk over the hill and they discover the freshest octopus they've ever had. And I think so. You know, the magic of Greece, and I saw it in this book. It isn't necessarily in like what's expected, you know. And so I don't know, Timothy, have you found that to be true, that when you have friends that have visited Greece, you know, for the first time, you know, that they fall in love with different aspects that they didn't expect?
Yes, and Lesbos is a real surprise to everybody. It's because it's the third largest island in Greece. It's really beautiful. Physically, it's very beautiful, and the villages are charming. They're a little surprised by Lesbos because it doesn't have the whitewashed villages, and everybody thinks it's exactly what all of Greece is, and it's not. So
Right.
something. But people like the smaller islands, and I do too. I couldn't go to Greece this year, and I am determined to go next spring for longer than I usually go. And I am going to do a little bit of island hopping, which I haven't done for a while because I've tended to go just to Polygos for the last few years. But I'm going to go back and do some island hopping and checking with a friend on Santorini who's still there, and just, you know, see a few more places like you're talking about.
Yeah, I think like our last trip, one island that we included, which was completely different than the other islands that didn't have the whitewashed buildings, was Spetsis, which have you been to that island?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it felt more like Tuscany, and it had a lot of large villas, and
No.
a lot of us, you know, rented bikes and rode around the island. I mean, the warmth, the beauty of it, but it was green in a way that the other islands were, and lush in a way that the other islands were.
Right.
You know, closer, I think, to the Peloponnese. So again, you're the vegetation, the feeling of it, and so it surprised people, because I think again, people were expecting the whitewashed buildings, and it not being there. It just left people wanting more. A lot of people say, like, I'd love to go back and spend a week or two in Spetsis, an island that nobody'd heard of before. So
Yeah.
what's on your list? What's on your list that you haven't been to that you're looking forward to visiting?
I haven't been to Foligrandos. I've
heard about that. Yeah.
I've never been to Andros. And I'd like to see Milos. You mentioned Milos, and I've not been there.
Yeah,
And
Milos
I want to
is
go back
a
to Patmos. I
large
think
island.
Patmos was a wonderful island. But I was there, but I was there so long ago that I want to go back and see it. I liked it very much.
Right. Yeah. I've heard Foligandros is like described as a mini Santorini. So if you're curious about that.
Well, this is great. We have two ways now to go to Greece. You can either go directly with Craig and Source Events, who will take you around the Greek islands. Craig and his team do an amazing job of thinking of every detail. They will plan all of your trip. Or if you can't do that, or do both, you can actually read and take yourself there with Fire on the Island. This has been fascinating. Like I said, you've got two ways to go to Greece now. Timothy, thank you for taking your time to talk about the book. And Craig, thank you for your insight and bringing the travel world to us. Do you all have any additional questions or anything else we could go over?
Not right now.
No. Arthur's going to bring up Timothy's information for us. So Timothy, you're online. And Craig, your Source Events, tell us your website.
It's sourceevents.com.
Arthur's got it right there, sourceevents.com. He's always prepared for us. So this has been great. I really appreciate everyone's time. How fascinating. And go to Greece, go to where they created culture and they got to create before everything began. You get to stand there where the great thinkers were. It feels like you're on a movie set. You're just not prepared for how amazing it's going to be. And it almost feels like a movie set, and it almost feels like it's not real. It is so it's just awe-inspiring. And everywhere you turn, there's another piece of history and another piece of history. And to soak it in and just see all where culture began. It's an amazing trip. And what a great book. I took it with me to Key West and was finishing it up this past trip. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been great. Is there any other last comments?
Thank you. I really appreciate the invitation.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Timothy, for the book and the opportunity to be part of this interview, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you. I ask everyone this question. What encouraging words can you give people, viewers, during this tough time? And I'm sorry I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm sure you've got some encouraging words because this is such a challenging time for people. So, Craig, you're always the man of words. Well, both of you are, ironically. Craig, I'll put you on the spot first.
Well, I think that look, I mean, this is a challenging time for a lot of us. I mean, especially being in the travel industry, we usually have a trip every month, and we haven't had a trip for the last 6 months now. So, but what I would say is, I talk to our travelers or people is that things are coming back. I was just in Mexico City last week in San Miguel Allende planning future trips. So I'm optimistic about the future. I'm excited about the future. I'd have to say that the world out there, the world of Greece, the world of Europe, all the experiences that you've dreamed of are still out there. And I know from conversations I've had with leaders of the travel industry that people are even more excited. And I feel like for our travelers, there's going to be even a renewed magic to being able to travel again. So, but in the meanwhile, stay safe. It's a great time to read. So pick up Fire on the Island, it's a great time to spend with friends and family. So, that's my words.
That's a good word. Timothy, how about you? We'll put you on the spot.
Okay, first I want to say, Craig, I agree that the magic of travel will still be out there, even perhaps enhanced.
Right.
I went to Venice last week because we could drive there as opposed to taking an airplane, and feel a little safer doing that. And we really enjoyed it. And I think that people are going to really appreciate travel even more once they're able to. For me personally, I spent a lot of time at home working. So the confinement or the lockdown, whatever you want to call it, hasn't been too disruptive to me. I think it's a very creative and productive time for me. But I also see that these kind of interviews, or I'm going to talk about Zoom a little bit, that people are taking classes. Like as soon as I'm done here, I'm actually giving a class at the American Library in Paris on Zoom. I've got 20 participants coming in, and these kind of opportunities are going to become more and more available. And I think once we get past the virus and the confinement, we're still going to find that, hey, this is a good way to outreach to people and connect with a lot more people than we ever did before. My partner's a photographer, and he would fly off to Maine for photography classes, and now he doesn't have to. He can do it, right here. And same with my giving a lecture or a workshop in Paris today. I don't have to get on the train and be up there. I can be right here, and I can do this, and it's cost effective for everybody. So I think there are a lot of ways that we're going to come out of this with more creative opportunities, and we're going to be just fine.
Great.
Yes, we will. Well, this is Stephen in Wilton Manors, Craig in Miami Beach, and Timothy in France. This has been our international show today. Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to more work, more travel, and more chats. And if you'd like to learn more about us, you can text OCQ to 22828. Have a great afternoon. We look forward to more adventures.